All information contained in this podcast is general in nature and does not consider your individual circumstances. You should consider the appropriateness of this information with regards to your individual objectives, financial situation, and needs. Welcome to Sharing More Than the Sheets, a podcast to help you and your partner make better financial and lifestyle decisions so that you can both focus on the things that you love. I'm your host, Michael Khouri, financial planner, green thumb, husband, and just dad. This segment is called Michael's Magic Moment. It's my opportunity to play a little snippet from one of our previous episodes, which resonated with our listeners, that I received feedback from, or I felt really had an impact on some people's lives. Hope you enjoy it. This week we go back to an episode that I did with Romy of Fulljames Law, and she talks about the importance of a will and the risks of a homemade will. Many people I come across regularly will have a homemade will. It'll be something maybe they got from the post office, or something, it could be a template they downloaded online, or just a piece of paper they've scribbled on. And in a way it's better than nothing, but then again I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really say that. But at the same time, it's really important to understand the risks of having something like that. And in this episode, she goes through that. I highly recommend that you go back to listen to the full episode where we really get into it. And I feel like this is something that everyone needs to listen to, because it's great to build wealth. It's great to manage your money well. But unless you've got something in place to ensure it ends up going to your loved ones when you pass away, in a way it could be pointless. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Not the most exciting topic to be discussing, but a very important topic to be discussing. And I hope you get something out of it. The idea of a simple will kit or a DIY will comes up, and I have a lot of clients ask me, hey, look, well, I've just got a will I bought from the post office, or I've just written something out on a piece of paper. Isn't that good enough? And my answer is usually, well, maybe, potentially it's better than nothing, but I'm not a lawyer. So just to make things a lot easier, I've invited a lawyer, a very qualified lawyer, to talk about this topic. Romy Fulljames, who is the principal and founder of Fulljames Law, is with us here today. So Romy, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
What do you think, Romy? So am I right in saying that it's sort of better than nothing, but it's really not good enough in most cases?
Yeah, there's probably tiers, to be honest. So the writing something on a piece of paper would be my least preferred option. In fact, potentially having more headache than benefit, mainly because if you don't sign a will properly, then we end up having to apply to the court to have that accepted as a will, and there can be contention around that, and that can be an expensive process in of itself. But if you're using a template will, whether that's online or post office, that can be a good way to give control to somebody else to handle your estate. But I will say that most of the estates I end up helping with when somebody has passed away do end up being some form of template or post office will. And the reason that those family members end up seeing a lawyer is because there are problems. And those problems can be as simple as I've had wills where the testator, so the person making the will, they've drawn arrows, trying to link names here to names there. I've had one recently where the will makers just said, I leave everything to this person to distribute for me, which is an absolute headache in terms of validity of the will, etc. And so there are all these little nuances in succession law, which obviously I won't bore you with today, but that's what makes doing your own DIY will so complex, as you can think, to the average person, this makes complete sense. But in that legal context, it just causes administrative hurdles and legal hurdles.
Well, that, and also, am I right in saying that See, when I did my will, when my wife and I did our wills, I had been telling clients to do theirs for about 10 years till we did
Yeah.
ours. And I remember when it was done, it was a very formal process. Even the document, the pages weren't double-sided. They had to be bound. They couldn't just be stapled. There was all these things there were all these precautions in place to make sure that the will is still valid. And am I right in saying that if someone does like a simple will or just a DIY type of thing, that it does leave a lot of room as well for that will to just be easily contested or just deemed as invalid as well? That, like, hey, look, this wasn't done properly, or what about this, or there's just too many loose ends.
Absolutely. And, then it really is up to your family members who are in a state of grief at this time to then, take that legal process underway. And it's not only expensive for your estate, but it's, when we're dealing with people that are grieving, it's such a sensitive time. It's a private time. And when your family is forced to then be on the phone with a lawyer and go through a court process, it's incredibly difficult. And so, yeah, there are a lot of rules. There's a lot of nuances. The other really big benefit to having a lawyer involved in signing is, yes, all the administrative stuff is done, but you've also got then a very qualified person who's taken notes and recorded, that signing meeting to be able to testify on your behalf. So remembering that at this point you've passed away, you can't come back and say, I meant this or I meant that. So you're really left with those witnesses that witnessed your will and saying that, yep, it's valid. We signed it all in the one time, et cetera, et cetera. And when a lawyer's involved in that process, obviously we can then give a lot more, solid insight into that time period. The other thing with will kits or DIY wills that get left to the side is obviously that general estate planning piece about what else you might own, or capacity. Capacity is such a big one. We see people not consider your enduring power of attorney forms. What happens if you were to get unwell, end up in hospital, not be able to make decisions for yourself? Who has that legal authority to act on your behalf? And then obviously if you have other structures in play, if you have family trust, company, self-managed super, anything like that, you really need a thorough estate plan, and a DIY will just isn't going to cut it. And obviously you're just losing that ability to have a conversation with a qualified professional who can give you some insight. One of the biggest things I talk to every potential client that comes across my path is the power of testamentary trusts, and some of those bigger advice pieces that really set apart just a standard will from an actual lawyer drafted will.
And I'd actually love to get into testamentary trusts, but just before that as well, I want to ask you, am I right in saying as well that when it comes to an estate, if family members and anyone, ex-partners or business partners or friends or anybody wants to contest an estate, usually they don't need money. Like their lawyer essentially can just take their fees out of the estate, which I think a lot of people don't realize this, because that's how estates get drained, and that's money that potentially would just end up going to lawyers instead of family members.
Yeah, that's right. So, and every state and territory has its own rules around these claims. They're called family provision claims. And what happens is there's set categories of people that when somebody passes away, these set categories will always have the ability to claim against the estate. So in Queensland, we look at spouses, which is obviously a married person, but also a de facto spouse and civil partner, children, and dependents. So anyone that satisfies those categories can then make a claim against an estate. So again, it's about having that conversation with a qualified professional to realize, oh, hang on a second, I never formalized my divorce. We've just been separated for X number of years. Or, oh, I've got this child that I don't see or I don't want to give those funds to because they, are potentially struggling with addiction, or they mishandle money, or I haven't been in contact with them for ages. So it's not as simple as just leaving your inheritance to whoever you want. You also need to have in the back of your mind that the law does step in, and it does make provision for people. And it is a very important consideration. A lot of strategy will go into your estate planning, if that's a risk for you.
And I like that I've really liked that you highlighted the idea of, not the idea, but the fact that family members would have to be dealing with the process if they're dealing with a will that has too
Yeah.
many issues or holes in it. Because just from experience with clients, like when a family member passes away, for me, it's even a struggle to get them to just fill out a form to claim
Yeah.
on their super or something like that. So them having to deal with courts and lawyers and all that extra stress, um, is not good at all. And I think talking to anyone listening to this episode that probably doesn't have like a properly drafted will, or they think the will may not be properly drafted, leaving money to family members is great, but I think leaving them with peace of mind and,
Mm,
you know, less stress is probably even more important as well. And you see
absolutely.
that, don't you?
Oh, we just see, we walk with families through some of the most sensitive and private times in their lives. We work a lot with clients that are also terminal, so they are, have a terminal illness, so they are really, that's, in the forefront of their mind is making it as smooth as possible for clients. But we also, see people tragically, pass away completely unexpected, and the difference between having something prepared for your loved ones is so important. I personally have walked through a lot of death in my family and in my friendship groups. This is not something to us that we are not familiar with, either on a professional level or a personal level. And it's why we're so passionate about it, because death is something none of us can escape. So we really have to make sure that we put our loved ones in the best position we can. And anyone that has walked through, someone passing away and walks through the administrative hurdles, let alone the legal hurdles that take place, will have an appreciation for just how complex it can be.
And also the fact that you mentioned the insights that a lawyer provides when someone's filling out a will.
Yeah.
That's massive. You're right, because there are so many different things apart from just assets that need to be taken into account.
Hmm.
Um, can you just touch on a few of those things, including testamentary trusts and just extra, I guess, provisions or things that someone should be considering apart
Yeah.
from just their assets?
Yeah, definitely. I think like a good estate planning lawyer will really have a conversation with you more about where your values lie and what your, dream legacy would be for your family. We might see clients that are really in a growth phase of their life where they are, heavily investing in business, or they are, aiming to purchase their first house. They might have a young family. They're in a very different space to, say, somebody preparing for retirement. And again, that estate plan will reflect that. And so obviously, I mentioned before, if you have structures in place, you need a succession plan that covers those. And by structures, I mean things like companies and trusts and self-managed super. They all need to be dealt with. But some of those insights a lawyer will give you are things probably pretty practical when it comes down to it, but it's things that we see play out. Things like if you have young kids, and you're appointing a guardian, the kind of conversation that I'll have with a client is that, okay, so your children are, say, 3 and 5, and you're appointing your family friend as a guardian, as often is the case, who perhaps doesn't have kids or already has 3 kids. Okay, that's great. Will that guardian have to buy a new house? Will they have to buy a new car? What does that look like for them to really take that role of guardian for you and for, your most precious people in your life, your kids? Do we need to consider setting up that guardian with a gift as well to, set up that guardian with a gift as well to, provide for them, and not in a way that's payment or a gift, but having a real consideration for the practical consequences of taking up some of these roles. Another common thing that we talk to clients about is who they might appoint as their executor, or if they're utilizing a testamentary trust, their trustee. And these people play really significant roles in a deceased estate process. They take on a lot of management considerations, and often I have clients who are like, oh, I want to appoint my brother and he lives in London. You go, well, really, when it comes to it, you really need to appoint somebody who's on the ground, able to access lawyers, not having to jump through hoops. As simple as if you appoint a foreign person, you can hinder yourself or burden the estate with additional tax complications. You can also force them to have to go and get things signed by a notary rather than simply a lawyer or a JP. It's little nuances like that that really make a huge difference to your loved ones.
Thanks for joining us on Sharing More Than the Sheets. Please make sure you subscribe to be updated with future episode releases, and feel free to share this episode with any friends or family that you think it might benefit. Please visit us at sharingmorethanthesheets.com.au to submit questions or requests for future podcast topics. These podcasts have been brought to you by Better Financial Planning Australia. To book a 15-minute phone chat, visit betterfinancialplanning.com.au.